Hi guys, Svetlana Sotak here. Thanks for coming back. Today I'm going to show you how to turn a quilt as you go patchwork panel from my previous video into a lovely double-sided quilted coaster. Let's start, shall we? Here is what you will need. Your finished quilt as you go patchwork panel should be about 6 inches square. You will need a 6-inch square of cotton batting. I am using warm and natural. And you will also need a 5.5-inch square of quilting cotton. For your binding, you will need a 2.25-inch wide by 21 inches long strip of quilting cotton. Just choose any color you like. And then go ahead and fold the strip in half and press using hot iron and lots of steam to get a nice crisp fold in the middle. You will also need a ruler, cutting mat, rotary cutter, and hand sewing supplies, and also a matching thread for hand sewing. Place your patchwork panel on your cutting mat and use ruler and a rotary cutter to trim your panel to 5-inch square. Now here is my already trimmed panel, and what I did, I took it to my sewing machine and used 1/8 inch seam allowance to stitch all the way around the perimeter of the panel just to secure all the quilting stitches so they don't get undone. Now set your quilt as you go patchwork panel aside for a little bit, and it's time to work on the backing for your coaster. So to do that, you will need your 6-inch square of cotton batting and place a 5.5-inch square of quilting cotton right side up on top, like this. Now, I like to just smooth out the quilting cotton using my hands. Since this is a very small panel you'll be working with, I don't think there is any need for basting, but if you do prefer to baste, you can use basting pins or even basting glue to attach the two layers together. And then just go ahead, take it to your sewing machine and quilt the panel using any design you prefer. Here's my quilted panel. As you can see, I just used a random crosshatch pattern, and I trimmed my backing to measure 5-inch square, and then I went ahead and again did the stitching all the way around the panel to secure the quilting stitches. Here's what the panels look like at this point. Here's the top of the coaster, back of the coaster, and both of these panels at this point have cotton batting on the wrong sides of the panels. What we need to do now is place the panels batting sides together. So pretty sides are on the outside. Now use sewing clips, or you could use pins if you prefer. I like to use sewing clips because they're super easy to clip on and take off. And they're really great for holding layers together. Just clip them together, take the panel to your sewing machine and stitch all the way around the panel using maybe, again, 1/8 inch seam allowance to stitch the two panels together. Now here I already have a coaster that has its backing all attached, and now we are ready to start adding binding to our coaster. I'm at my sewing machine now, ready to start adding binding, and I wanted to show you what we are going for. So here is the panel that we'll be adding our binding to, and here is the finished coaster. So as you can see, we'll be adding binding by machine to the top of the coaster, then flipping it around and finishing the binding by hand stitching it to the back of the coaster. So I start by placing my binding about 1.5 inches away from the top edge, one edge, it doesn't really matter which one, and I line up my binding with the raw edge of the coaster. As you can see, the fold is here, raw edge is right here, and I will start stitching again about 1.5 inches from the other edge of the coaster. As you can see, I'm using black thread, so you can see where I'm sewing, but for you, definitely use coordinating thread so it's not sticking out. So first, make sure you backstitch at the beginning. So until you get to the 1/4 inch from the edge right here. Now stop right here. I can feel it with my finger where the edge is, and I can estimate where approximately 1/4 inch is. If you needed to, you can use a ruler and mark it so you know where to stop. So stop at the 1/4 inch away from the edge. Keep your needle down. Turn your coaster by 45 degrees and then stitch all the way to the end. Just going to trim my threads. And you see what it does? It just gives you an angle here, so it makes it much easier for you to fold your binding in the next step. So what you do now is fold it up at a 45-degree angle and bring it down onto itself like that. And again, line up your binding with the edge of your coaster and start stitching right here where you can feel where the fold is. And again, back stitch at the beginning. And again, I'm just using my finger right here to show me where the end of the coaster is, so I remember to stop stitching 1/4 inch from the edge. That's good. Turn it like this. And again, fold it up at 45-degree angle and fold it back down onto itself. And it's okay to go slow. You just want to make sure you get it as neat as possible. No need to rush. And now we are on our final corner. So again, I fold it the same way I did the other corners. I get this binding out of my way because I don't want to stitch over it. And again, start stitching here, but this time only stitch about 1 inch into your binding and then back stitch. And this is what we have now. As you can see, binding isn't connected right here because we want to have nice neat edge right here. I don't attach it right away. Here is what I do. So this will be the line where we'll attach it. So I cut my binding right here, about 1/4 inch from the fold line, right here. And then fold this binding over. And these two bindings will overlap by 1/2 inch because I'm using 1/4 inch seam allowance, like that. And I will just cut it right here. I will now open up the binding, place it right sides together, place the short edges right sides together like this, and then stitch them together like that along this edge using 1/4 inch seam allowance and back stitching at the beginning and end. And I find it works best when I don't pin or clip these. This edge, I just kind of adjust it as I go. And just take your time. There we go. The binding is stitched together. Now I just press my seam open. And for that, I only finger press it. There is no need to take the iron out for this step. And as you can see, the binding is now neatly the right length that we need it to be. Now, if you suddenly found out that it's longer than what you need or shorter, if you did a smaller or bigger seam allowance, just go ahead, rip out the stitches and redo this step, because you want your binding to sit as straight and neat as possible. And now we're just going to go ahead and attach the rest of the binding to the coaster. So this is what it looks like now. All the binding is neatly added to the top part of the coaster. And we'll be flipping it over to the wrong side and attaching it there. So to do that, turn the coaster back side up. I'll trim some of the threads. I don't want them to get in the way. Just line up your binding neatly along the edge of the coaster. And I like to use, again, sewing clips to keep my binding in place. Like that. When I come to the corner, I like to make it as neat as possible. Nice, neat corner, and put a clip here so it stays in place. Maybe add another one right here. And go all the way around the coaster, folding up the binding down as I go, as well as folding the corners. And here's another corner, and just pay attention so you fold your corners in the same direction. It will look much nicer and neater. And you see here's our final join right here, but since we pressed it open, it's not a bulky seam at all, and it just really gives you a lovely sort of seamless finish right here. And I'm just going to neaten up this corner like that. There we go. All that's left to do now is to attach binding to the back of our coaster. Now I'm going to hand stitch my binding on. If you have a different preferred method, definitely go with that. And I'm just slowly catching the backing as well as a little bit of the binding in my stitches. As you can see, I'm using a thread that will match my binding so it's not visible. I want these stitches to be small, neat, and as little visible as possible. And I'll just go all the way around the coaster, attaching the binding in place. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I can't wait to see your beautiful makes. Happy sewing!